The stars had always called to humanity. For 200 years, they had answered that call. They built ships that could travel faster than light. They found new worlds and made them home. 17 star systems now held human colonies. Millions of people lived among the stars, and in all that time, they had never found anyone else. Commander Alara Vance stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Pathfinder's Dream. She was a tall woman with gray streaks in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many empty worlds. Behind her, her crew of 42 worked at their stations. They had been exploring the edge of human space for 6 months. "Commander," said Lieutenant Park, her navigator, "I'm picking up something strange. There's a slip corridor here that isn't on any of our maps." Alara walked to his station and looked at the screen. Slip corridors were natural tunnels through space. Humanity had used them to spread across the stars, but they had mapped every corridor in their territory years ago. "That's impossible," she said. "We've scanned this region 100 times. It wasn't here before," Park replied. "It just appeared, like it was hidden somehow." Ilara felt her heart beat faster. In 200 years, humanity had never found a new corridor. This could change everything. New corridors meant new stars, new worlds, new possibilities. "Where does it lead?" she asked. "Unknown. It's stable, though. We could go through." Protocol said she should report this and wait for orders. Protocol said she should be careful. But Alara had not become an explorer by being careful. She had done it by being curious. "Take us in," she ordered. The ship moved toward the corridor. Space twisted around them. Colors that had no name flashed across the viewports. For 3 minutes, they traveled through something that was not quite space and not quite time. Then they emerged. Alara's breath caught in her throat. Before them hung a structure so large it made her mind hurt to look at it. It was a ring around a star, a band of metal and light that could have held 1,000,000,000 Earths. Ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Thousands of ships, maybe millions. "My God," whispered someone behind her. "Commander," Park said, his voice shaking. "I'm reading massive energy signatures, weapons signatures. They're powering up." Within seconds, ships began moving toward them. Not dozens, hundreds. They were sleek and sharp, built for war. Each one was 10 times the size of the Pathfinder's Dream. "Get us out of here," Alara ordered. "Now." But before Park could turn the ship, the view screen flickered. A face appeared. It was not human. The being was tall and thin, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed like dying stars. Its skin was like black glass, and when it spoke, its voice was like breaking stones. "Creatures of unknown origin," it said. "You have entered the sacred space of the dominion of the ascending throne. You have violated the eternal law. Identify yourselves." Alara stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her voice steady. "I am Commander Alara Vance of the United Earth Coalition. We are explorers. We meant no harm. We did not know this space was claimed." The being tilted its head. "United Earth Coalition. Earth. These words are not known to us. You are. New. We come in peace," Alara said. "We only wish to learn and—" Silence. The word cut through her like a knife. "I am Archon Vale Sarath, voice of the ascending throne. For 12,000 years, the Dominion has ruled this galaxy. We have brought order to chaos. We have corrected the errors of lesser species. You have entered our space without permission. This is a crime that cannot be forgiven." Alara felt cold. "We will leave immediately. We will never return. Please, we didn't know." "Your ignorance does not matter," Vale Sarath replied. "You have seen our sacred ring. You have looked upon the throne of heaven. For this, your species must be corrected. All of you. Every world, every ship, every man, woman, and child. This is the law." The connection cut off. The screen went dark. "Commander," Park shouted. "They're locking weapons. All power to engines," Ilara commanded. "Get us back to the corridor. Now." The Pathfinder's Dream turned and ran. Behind them, the Dominion ships opened fire. The first shots missed, but only barely. The ship shook as energy beams passed close enough to scorch the hull. "Corridor in 30 seconds, Park called out. More shots. One hit their rear shields. Alarms screamed. Smoke filled the bridge. 20 seconds. Another hit. The lights flickered. Someone screamed. 10 seconds. Elara gripped her chair as the ship dove into the corridor. Space twisted again. The colors returned. And then they were through. Back in human space. Damaged but alive. For a long moment. No one spoke. They just breathed. They just existed. They were alive. And that felt like a miracle. Send a message to Earth. Elara finally said. Send it to every colony. Maximum priority. Tell them we are not alone. And tell them what's coming. She looked back at the corridor behind them. It sat there like an open wound in space. Somewhere on the other side, an empire of 12,000 years was preparing for war. An empire that had conquered countless species. An empire that saw humanity as nothing more than an error to be fixed. How long do we have? Lieutenant Park asked quietly. Elara shook her head. I don't know. Days, weeks, maybe months. What do we do? She turned to face her crew. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes. They had just learned that the universe was full of life, and that life wanted them dead. But they were also looking to her for answers. For hope. For something to hold on to. We fight, she said. We warn everyone. We prepare. And we fight. We pretend to know. Against that. Park gestured at the screen, at the memory of millions of ships and a ring around a star. How do we fight against that? Elara thought about her daughter back on Earth. About the billions of humans who didn't know their world had just been marked for death. About everything humanity had built over thousands of years. I don't know how, she admitted. But I know that we will. Because we don't have a choice. Because giving up means dying. And humans. She straightened her shoulders. Humans don't give up. The ship limped toward the nearest colony to spread the warning. Behind them, the corridor remained open. And somewhere across the galaxy, Archon Vale Sarath gave the order to begin the correction. Humanity's first contact with alien life had lasted less than 5 minutes. It had taken less than 5 minutes for them to be sentenced to death. But as Elara Vance stared at the stars, she made a silent promise. The Dominion thought humanity was weak. They thought humans would break like all the others. They thought this would be easy. They were wrong. Humanity had not conquered disease, death, and the void of space by being weak. They had not survived ice ages, wars, and plagues by giving up, and they would not go quietly into extinction because some ancient empire demanded it. The Dominion wanted a war. They would get one, and they would learn, too late, that humanity was not an error to be corrected. Humanity was a fire that refused to die. 6 months had passed since first contact. In that time, humanity had learned what the word correction truly meant. The Dominion did not negotiate. They did not ask for surrender. They simply arrived with fleets of 1,000 ships and erased everything in their path. 3 human colonies had already fallen. 15 million people were dead. Another 20 million were missing, taken to places no human could imagine. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the UEC Defiance and watched the enemy approach. New Valencia was the 4th colony in their path. It was a beautiful world of green forests and blue oceans. 8 million people called it home. Today, those people would either live or die based on what happened in the next few hours. Admiral, his tactical officer said, enemy fleet entering weapons range. I count 600 warships. Chen had 42 ships. 42 against 600. All vessels. Hold formation, he ordered. Wait for my command. The human fleet had positioned itself between the Dominion and New Valencia. It was a thin line of metal against an ocean of death. Chen knew the math. He knew they couldn't win, but he also knew what would happen to the people below if they ran. So they stayed. The Dominion ships opened fire first. Beams of purple energy sliced through space. The first human ship, the Resolute, exploded in a ball of fire. Then the Santiago. Then the Morning Star. Return fire, Chen commanded. Human weapons were weaker than Dominion weapons. Human ships were slower and smaller. But human crews had something the Dominion didn't understand. They had nothing left to lose. The Defiance dove straight into the enemy formation. Its guns fired without stopping. 2 Dominion ships died before they could react. A 3rd lost its engines. A 4th simply exploded. Sub-Archon Thesic watched from his command ship, the Eternal Judgment. He had commanded dozens of corrections. Every species reacted the same way. They ran. They begged. They died. But these humans were different. What are they doing? He asked his officers. Why do they not retreat? On his screen, he watched a damaged human ship ram itself into a Dominion cruiser. Both ships vanished in fire. Another human vessel, its weapons gone, flew directly into the path of his attack craft, letting them crash into it so they couldn't reach New Valencia. They're sacrificing themselves, his officer replied, confusion in his voice. They know they cannot win, but they fight anyway. Madness, Thesic said. This is madness, but somewhere deep inside, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. It was small and cold, and it took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 39 human ships were destroyed. Admiral Chen's Defiance was burning, barely alive, limping away with a crew of wounded and dying soldiers, but 15 Dominion ships were gone. Dozens more were damaged, and New Valencia still stood. The Dominion took the planet 3 days later when reinforcements arrived, but those 3 days were enough to evacuate 2 million people. 2 million lives saved because 42 ships refused to run. On the surface of occupied worlds, the Dominion learned another lesson about humanity. They had expected the survivors to accept their fate. Every other species had. When the Dominion conquered, the conquered obeyed. That was the natural order, but humans did not obey. On New Valencia, resistance began within hours of occupation. Soldiers who had hidden during the invasion emerged to attack supply lines. Civilians who had never held a weapon learned to make bombs from farming equipment. Children carried messages between hidden fighters. Old women poisoned Dominion water supplies. The Cathari ground forces were designed for control, not combat. They were administrators and overseers. They had never faced an enemy that refused to stop fighting. Commander Thesic's reports to Archon Vale Sereth grew more confused with each passing week. They hide in the forests and strike at night. They die rather than surrender information. Even their young fight us. We killed 10,000 today, and tomorrow there will be 10,000 more ready to take their place. Then kill them all. Vale Sereth replied. Every last one. My Archon. I am beginning to think that might be harder than we expected. Far from the front lines, Commander Ilara Vance watched the reports come in. Each one was worse than the last. Colony after colony fell. The death toll climbed higher every day, and she knew it was her fault. She had opened that corridor. She had led the Dominion to humanity. Every death, every burning world, every screaming child was because of her curiosity. The guilt was eating her alive. You need to stop blaming yourself, Admiral Chen told her during a secure communication. His face was burned, his arm in a sling, but he was already planning the next battle. You didn't start this war. They did. I gave them the path to us. They would have found us eventually. And at least this way we had warning. We had time to prepare. Ilara shook her head. We weren't prepared. We're losing. We're still fighting, Chen replied. That's more than anyone expected. The Dominion thought we'd surrender after the first attack. We didn't. They thought we'd break after the third colony fell. We didn't. They're starting to realize that we won't stop, ever. That won't be enough to save us. Maybe not, Chen admitted. But I've been thinking. The Dominion has ruled for 12,000 years. That means they've conquered a lot of species. Where are they all? Are they all dead, or are some still out there, waiting? Ilara looked at him. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe we're not as alone as we think. The enemy of my enemy, Commander. If there are others who hate the Dominion as much as we do, we need to find them. And how do we do that? We can barely defend our own space. Chen smiled, though there was no joy in it. That's where you come in. I need you to take a ship into Dominion territory. Find the species they conquered. Find out if any of them still fight. Find us allies. That's a suicide mission. Probably, he agreed. But it's also our only hope. Will you do it? Ilara thought about her daughter, safe for now on Earth. She thought about the millions already dead. She thought about the guilt that kept her awake every night. Maybe this was how she could make things right. Maybe this was how she could turn her mistake into something meaningful. Yes, she said. I'll do it. 3 weeks later, a small ship slipped through enemy lines and vanished into Dominion space. Its crew of 20 volunteers knew they would probably never come home. They went anyway, because somewhere in that vast empire of conquered peoples, there had to be others who remembered what freedom meant. There had to be others who still had the will to fight. Elara Vance intended to find them, and together, they would teach the Dominion something it had forgotten over 12,000 years of easy victories. Even the smallest fire can burn down a forest. Even the weakest species can bring down an empire. All they needed was the courage to try. 1 year into the war, humanity was still alive. Barely. 7 colonies had fallen. The death toll had reached 60 million. The UEC fleet had been reduced to less than 200 ships. Every day brought news of another defeat, another retreat, another world left to burn. But at the Arcturus defense perimeter, the line held. Admiral Chen had turned the system into a fortress. Every asteroid hid weapons. Every moon was a trap. The Dominion had tried to break through 3 times. 3 times they had failed. It was a small victory in an ocean of losses. But it was something. Deep in Dominion territory, Elara Vance and her crew were discovering something remarkable. The Dominion had conquered over 200 species in 12,000 years. Most were gone now, erased from existence or bred into mindless servants. But some survived. They lived in the shadows, hiding on forgotten worlds, surviving in the spaces between the stars. They called themselves the remnant peoples. Elara found the Vethkai first. They were aquatic beings with skin like silver and minds that could touch other minds. The Dominion had boiled their oceans 3,000 years ago, but some had escaped to underwater caves on dead moons. They lived in darkness, never forgetting what they had lost. "You are the humans," their elder said, his voice whispering directly into Elara's thoughts. "We have heard stories. You fight the Dominion." "We do," Elara replied. "You will lose. Everyone loses. Maybe. But we won't stop trying." The elder was silent for a long moment. Then he showed her something she would never forget. He opened his mind and let her see his memories. She saw his world as it once was, beautiful and alive. She saw the Dominion ships arrive. She saw the water turn to steam as billions died screaming. And she saw something else. A tiny flame of anger that had burned for 3,000 years, waiting for the right moment to become a fire. "We have waited," the elder said. "We have survived. We have hoped that one day, someone would show us it was possible to fight back. You have shown us. Will you help us? We are few. We are weak. We have nothing to offer but our hatred." Elara smiled. "That's enough. Hatred can be a weapon." She found the Oruni next. They were not like any life form she had encountered. They were crystals that thought, minerals that dreamed. They did not live as individuals but as a connected whole. The Dominion had shattered their homeworld and scattered their pieces across 100 systems. But even broken, they remembered. "We hear your broadcast." The Oruni collective spoke through vibrations in the stone. "You ask for help against the throne. I ask for alliance," Elara said. "Not help, alliance. We stand together or we die alone." Curious. Others have come before. Others have asked. They offered us freedom in exchange for service. You offer nothing. I offer honesty. I don't know if we can win. I don't know if any of us will survive. But I know that dying on your feet is better than living on your knees. I know that the Dominion has to be stopped. And I know that we can't do it alone. The crystals hummed with a sound like distant thunder. "You are strange, human. You speak of death as if it does not frighten you." "It terrifies me," Elara admitted. "But some things are worth being afraid for." Silence. Then, "We will listen. We will consider. You are interesting." But the greatest discovery came on a hidden world at the edge of Dominion space. A planet wrapped in storms, invisible to sensors, protected by technology far beyond anything Elara had seen. The Thelasari had once ruled 1,000 systems. They had been old when the Dominion was young. Now only 3 worlds remained, hidden and forgotten, holding on to the memory of what they had been. Sovereign Malix was ancient. Her scales had faded from bright gold to pale silver. Her wings, once magnificent, now hung folded and tired against her back, but her eyes still burned with intelligence and fire. "Commander Vance," she said, "we have been watching your species since your first ship emerged from that corridor. We have seen your battles. We have counted your dead. Then you know we're losing." "Yes, but we also know something else." Malix leaned forward. "In 12,000 years of Dominion rule, no species has lasted this long against a correction campaign. No species has fought with such fury. No species has inspired such fear in the Archon's heart. Fear Our spies in the Dominion tell us that Vale Sareth has not slept well in months. He has tripled the guards on his flagship. He has ordered the construction of 200 new warships. He looks over his shoulder constantly. Malix almost smiled. You have reminded him that even emperors can fall. Elara felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope, will you help us? Malix was quiet for a moment. I am old, Commander. I have watched my people dwindle for centuries. I have seen hope die 1,000 times. I had accepted that the Thelisari would fade away, forgotten, until nothing remained but dust. And now? Now I wonder if perhaps I gave up too soon. The sovereign stood, and despite her age, there was strength in her bearing. I cannot promise victory. I cannot promise survival, but I can promise this. If you humans are truly willing to fight until the end, we will stand beside you. We will, Elara said. We are. Then let us call the others. Let us gather the broken, the scattered, the defeated. Let us build something the Dominion has never faced before. Over the next months, the coalition of the desperate took shape. 12 species who had been crushed by the Dominion found their courage again. They shared intelligence about Dominion weaknesses. They contributed ships, weapons, and fighters. They learned from humanity's tactics and taught their own in return. And they did something the Dominion never expected. They attacked. Across 20 sectors, sabotage operations began. Supply lines were cut. Communication arrays were destroyed. Dominion officers disappeared in the night. It wasn't much compared to the Dominion's power, but it was something they had never faced before. Organized resistance on multiple fronts. Archon Vale Zareth stood in his throne room and read the reports. Rebellions were sprouting like fires after a dry summer. Species that had been obedient for millennia were suddenly causing problems. How? He demanded. How have the humans done this? They are primitives. They have nothing. His advisors had no answer, because the truth was something the Dominion could not understand. Humans didn't inspire rebellion through strength or technology. They inspired it through example. They showed the galaxy that it was possible to stand up and say no. They showed the broken peoples that courage was not dead. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, all it took was one species too stubborn to give up to remind everyone else that giving up was a choice. The coalition was small. The coalition was weak. The coalition was held together by nothing but shared hatred and desperate hope. But it existed. And every day, it grew stronger. The fire was spreading. 3 years of war had changed everything. The Dominion still controlled 40,000 systems. They still had fleets beyond counting. By every measure that mattered, they were winning. But for the first time in 12,000 years, they were afraid. Rebellions burned across 20 sectors. Species that had been loyal servants for centuries were asking questions. Dominion soldiers were refusing to be stationed in human space because the casualty rates were too high. And throughout the Empire, a name was whispered in the dark, the Ember. Elara Vance had become something more than a commander. She had become a symbol. Stories spread about her across the galaxy. They said she could appear anywhere. They said she had killed 1,000 Dominion soldiers with her own hands. They said she could not be stopped, could not be caught, could not be killed. Most of the stories were lies. But lies have power when people want to believe them. The coalition of the desperate had grown to include 30 species. They did not have the strength to face the Dominion in open battle. But they had learned that open battle was not the only way to fight. They struck at night and vanished before dawn. They turned Dominion weapons against Dominion soldiers. They spread information about Dominion weaknesses to anyone who would listen. They made the cost of occupation higher than the Dominion was willing to pay. And slowly, system by system, the Empire began to crack. Admiral Chen stood before the Coalition War Council and presented his plan. Operation Prometheus, he said. The largest coordinated strike in the history of the rebellion. The holographic display showed 17 Dominion shipyards spread across 6 systems. These facilities built the warships that kept the Empire in power. Destroying them would not end the war, but it would slow the Dominion's ability to replace its losses. This is suicide, said the Vethkai representative. Each shipyard is protected by a defense fleet. We do not have the numbers to attack even one. You're right, Chen agreed. If we attack one at a time, we lose. But if we attack all 17 at once, the Dominion can't reinforce any of them. They'll have to choose which ones to save, and the others fall. Exactly. Sovereign Malix studied the display with ancient eyes. This will cost us dearly. We will lose many ships, many lives. Yes, Chen said, but the Dominion will lose more. And more importantly, they will lose the illusion of invincibility. When word spreads that we destroyed 17 shipyards in a single day, every slave species in the Empire will know that the Dominion can be hurt. The vote was close. But in the end, hope won over fear. Operation Prometheus, launched on the anniversary of first contact. 300 coalition ships divided into 17 strike groups. They hit their targets simultaneously, emerging from slip space with weapons already firing. Alara led the attack on the largest shipyard, a massive facility orbiting a gas giant that produced 50 warships a year. Her strike group had 22 ships against a defense fleet of 40. All vessels, follow my lead, she commanded. Target the construction bays first. We're not here to win a battle. We're here to break things. The fighting was brutal. Coalition ships died in the first minutes. But so did Dominion ships. And more importantly, the shipyard began to burn. Alara's ship, the Defiant Hope, took hit after hit. Fires broke out on 3 decks. The engines were failing. Half her crew was dead, but she kept fighting. Because stopping meant everyone who had already died had died for nothing. "Commander," her pilot shouted. "The main reactor on the shipyard is exposed. If we hit it now, do it." The Defiant Hope launched its last missiles. The shipyard's reactor cracked open like an egg. A new sun was born for a brief moment, consuming the facility and everything around it in fire. When the light faded, the shipyard was gone. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. 14 of the 17 shipyards were destroyed. The other 3 were badly damaged. It was the greatest military victory the Coalition had ever achieved, but the cost was terrible. 187 Coalition ships were gone. Nearly 20,000 fighters were dead, including, many believed, Alara Vance. The Defiant Hope had been caught in the shipyard's explosion. No debris was ever found. Archon Vale Zarath addressed the Dominion Senate with barely controlled rage. "This insult cannot stand. These primitives, these insects, have dared to strike at the heart of our power. They must be punished. Not just defeated. Punished." "What do you propose, Archon?" asked one of the senators. "The Silence Protocol. We will go to their homeworld. This, Earth, and we will erase it. Every city, every forest, every ocean. We will turn it into ash and let that ash drift through space as a warning to all who would defy us." The Senate agreed. 3,000 warships were gathered, the largest fleet assembled in 500 years. Weapons capable of cracking a planet's crust were loaded onto specialized vessels. The Annihilation Fleet set course for Sol, but Vale Zarath's triumph was interrupted by news that shook him to his core. Sub-Archon Thesic was dead, the officer who had led the first attacks on humanity, who had commanded the correction campaign, had been killed in his own quarters. His guards had been drugged, his security systems had been bypassed, and carved into his chest were 2 words in human script: "Remember us." The message was clear. The Ember was alive, and she could reach anyone. For the first time in his long life, Archon Vale Zarath felt fear not for his empire, but for himself. If the humans could kill a sub-Archon, surrounded by guards, in the heart of Dominion space, could they reach him too? He tripled his security. He moved to a new flagship. He trusted no one, and he pushed the Annihilation Fleet to move faster. Earth had to die. It had to die now, before the disease of hope spread any further. Across the galaxy, the Coalition received word of the approaching fleet. 3,000 ships heading for Earth. There was no way to stop them. Admiral Chen gathered the surviving Coalition forces at the Arctura's perimeter. 400 ships from a dozen species, against 3,000. "This is it," he told his captains. "Everything we've fought for comes down to this. If Earth falls, humanity dies. If humanity dies, the rebellion dies with us. Every sacrifice, every battle, every death will mean nothing." "Can we win?" someone asked. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "I don't know, but I know we're going to try. And I know that whatever happens, we're going to make them remember this day for the next 12,000 years. The Coalition fleet prepared for its final battle. The odds were impossible. The enemy was unstoppable. But hope is a strange thing. It doesn't care about odds. It doesn't listen to reason. Sometimes, hope is all you have, and sometimes, that's enough. The Dominion Annihilation Fleet emerged from slip space at the edge of the Sol system. 3,000 warships darkened the stars. At their center flew the Throne of Heaven, Archon Vale Sareth's flagship, a vessel so large it had its own gravity. From his command chamber, Vale Zarath looked at the small blue planet in the distance. Earth, the homeworld of the species that had caused him more trouble than any other in 12,000 years. Today it ends, he said. Today we correct our mistake. At the Mars threshold, Admiral Chen watched the enemy fleet approach. His own force was pitiful in comparison. 400 ships. Many were damaged. Some were held together by nothing but hope and welding. But they were all he had, and he would not run. All ships, he broadcast. This is Admiral Chen. You know why we're here. You know what's at stake. Our families are on that planet. Our history. Everything we've ever been, or ever will be. The Dominion thinks they can erase all of it. They think we'll break like everyone else. He paused and looked at the faces of his crew. They were scared. So was he. They're wrong. We are human beings. We survived ice ages. We survived plagues. We survived our own stupidity more times than I can count. And we will survive this, not because we're stronger than them, not because we're smarter, but because we refuse to give up. Because that's who we are. That's who we've always been. Admiral, his tactical officer interrupted. I'm detecting new contacts. Multiple slip space signatures behind us. Chen felt his heart sink. More Dominion ships. They were surrounded. Then the signatures resolved, and he understood. Ships began emerging from slip space. But they weren't Dominion ships. They were Thalassari dreadnoughts. Massive and ancient. Weapons hot. Vethkai bioships. Living vessels that screamed through space like angry gods. Oruni swarmcraft. Thousands of tiny crystals moving as one. And more. Ships from species Chen had never seen. Ships from worlds he didn't know existed. The coalition had come. Admiral Chen. Sovereign Malix's voice filled the bridge. You didn't think we'd let you fight alone, did you? How? Chen managed. How are you all here? You taught us something human. You taught us that some things are worth dying for. Earth is your home. But this fight is for all of us. If the Dominion wins here, they will hunt us down one by one. If they lose, Malix almost laughed. If they lose, everything changes. Across the fleet, signals came from 100 species. They had come from every corner of the galaxy. They had brought everything they had. The odds were still terrible, but they were no longer impossible. Vale Zarath watched the enemy fleet swell and felt something he had not felt in centuries. Doubt. Archon, his officer said. The enemy force is now approaching 800 vessels. Should we wait for reinforcements? No. Vale Zarath's voice was cold. We end this today. All ships, advance, destroy them all. The Battle of Sol began. The fighting was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Ships from 100 worlds fought side by side against the Dominion. Human destroyers flew beside Thalassari cruisers. Vethkai bioships protected Oruni swarms. Species that had been enemies for millennia now fought as brothers. The Dominion pressed forward with overwhelming force. Coalition ships died by the dozens. The line bent. It buckled. But it did not break. For 11 days, the battle raged. The fighting spread across the entire system. Mars became a graveyard of broken ships. Jupiter's moons burned with weapons fire. The asteroid belt was turned to dust. On the 10th day, when hope was fading, a small ship emerged from slip space behind the Dominion fleet. It was damaged, barely functional, held together by will more than metal. The defiant hope had returned. Alara Vance was alive. She had spent months behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence, building a strike team of the best fighters from every coalition species. She had one mission: kill the Archon. Her ship dove into the battle, weaving through the chaos of weapons, fire, and dying vessels. The Throne of Heaven loomed ahead, surrounded by its escort fleet. All systems to engines, Ilara ordered. Get us to that ship. Her pilot was a Vethkai named Serral. Her weapons officer was an Oruni shard that had been given a humanoid body. Her boarding team was made up of humans, Thalassari, and 6 other species. They were the last hope. The defiant hope took hit after hit as it approached. Shields failed. Hull breaches opened. The crew died one by one. But they reached the throne of heaven. They cut through its hull, and Elara Vance led her team inside. The fighting through the massive ship was brutal. Dominion soldiers fell, but so did Coalition fighters. By the time Elara reached the throne room, only she and 2 others remained. The door opened, and she stepped inside. Archon Vale Zarath stood waiting. He was enormous, towering over her, his eyes burning with ancient hatred. "The Ember," he said. "At last. I wondered when you would come for me." "It's over, Vale Zarath. Your fleet is failing. Your empire is cracking. You've already lost." "Lost?" The Archon laughed. "I have ruled for 3,000 years. I have crushed hundreds of species. I will crush you too. Today, tomorrow, it doesn't matter. We are eternal. You are nothing." Elara shook her head. "You still don't understand, do you? You keep asking why we fight, why we don't surrender, why we die rather than serve. Yes, explain it to me, human, before I kill you." Elara looked at the ancient being before her and felt no fear, only sadness. "We don't fight to survive," she said. "We fight to live. There's a difference. Survival means existing. Living means having something worth existing for. Freedom, family, hope. You took all of that from hundreds of species. You broke them so completely they forgot what living meant. And you haven't forgotten. We never will. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us dangerous." Vale Zarath moved faster than she expected. His blade cut through the air toward her throat, but Elara had not come to fight. She had come to end things. Her hand pressed the detonator hidden in her palm. Throughout the throne of heaven, charges that her team had planted during their assault detonated simultaneously. The great ship shuddered. Fire bloomed in its heart. Vale Zarath's eyes went wide. "No, for everyone you destroyed," Elara said. "For every species you erased. For every child you killed." The throne room collapsed around them. The throne of heaven broke apart and fell, burning, toward the sun. When the Dominion fleet saw their Archon's ship die, something broke inside them. The iron discipline that had held them together for 12,000 years shattered. Some ships fled. Some surrendered. Some turned on each other as old rivalries emerged. The Battle of Saul was won. The war continued for another decade. The Dominion fractured into successor states that fought among themselves. Many species that had been slaves claimed their freedom. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity survived. Earth survived. Scarred and wounded, but alive. The Coalition became the Galactic Accord. A new alliance built on a simple principle. Any species willing to fight for its freedom deserves to be free. 20 years after the Battle of Saul, an aged Elara Vance stood at a memorial on Earth. Around her stood representatives from 100 worlds. Above them, ships from across the galaxy filled the sky. A young human officer approached her. "Admiral Vance? May I ask you something?" Elara smiled. "Admiral." She still wasn't used to the title. "Of course. Do you think we changed anything? Really changed anything?" Elara looked at the sky. At the ships. At the beings who had once been slaves and were now free. "We changed everything," she said. "We showed the galaxy that empires can fall. We showed them that hope is not weakness. We showed them that even the smallest species can matter if they're willing to stand up and fight. But so many died. Was it worth it?" Elara was quiet for a long moment. She thought about everyone she had lost. Friends, family, crew members who had followed her into impossible battles. "I don't know if it was worth it," she finally said. "I don't think that's for me to decide. But I know that they didn't die for nothing. They died for this." She gestured at the sky, at the free galaxy above them. They died so that others could live. Really live. Not just survive. The young officer nodded slowly. "Thank you, Admiral." Elara watched him walk away. Then she looked up at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, the ashes of the Dominion still smoldered. New challenges would come. New enemies would rise. But humanity would face them. They would face them together, with their allies, with their friends, with the family they had forged in fire, because that was what it meant to be human, not to be the strongest, not to be the smartest, but to be stubborn enough to keep fighting, to be foolish enough to keep hoping, to be brave enough to stand up when everyone else had given up. The stars had always called to humanity, and humanity had answered, not just as explorers, not just as survivors, as something more. as the species that taught a galaxy to hope again,